The sound of rain drummed steadily on the glass roof of an East Side bar, each drop clinging to the window pane like memories that refused to fade. Ethan sat alone at the counter, the golden glow of the lamp casting shifting reflections on his half-finished glass of whiskey. He had no real reason to be there, except for an old, stubborn habit, escaping the insomnia of sleepless nights. Outside, the city's crowds hurried and swirled beneath the rain, but Ethan only felt himself drifting, lost in the very city that once belonged to both him and her. An old song played, weaving itself into the background hum of rain and the soft laughter of weekend groups. Ethan pulled out his phone, scrolled absently through unread messages, and for a fleeting second, his finger froze over one name. Julia. More than 3 years had passed since they'd broken up, yet her name still sent a sharp pain through his heart, a cut that had never quite healed. He had never thought he'd see her here again, on a night as damp and blurred as this. The bar's door swung open, letting in a gust of cold air and the faint trace of perfume. Ethan looked up, and his gaze collided with that of a woman entering alongside a tall, unfamiliar man. In that split second, all noise seemed to recede into the background. Julia. Her long hair spilled loosely down her back, a sleek black dress hugged her figure, familiar and strange all at once, while her deep blue eyes swept quickly across the crowd and landed on Ethan's face, just for a moment, yet in that look was an entire winter unspoken. She walked with a tall man, successful by his posture, his movements gentle but possessive. They chose a table near the window, directly across from Ethan, but only Julia seemed to notice his presence. Their eyes met for a brief heartbeat before she turned away, feigning indifference as if nothing had happened. Ethan smirked faintly, silently wondering why his heart was racing so wildly. It was just seeing an ex, he told himself, but his hand still reached for his whiskey glass as if it were an anchor. In the haze of music and blurred lights, time seemed to slow for Ethan. He couldn't take his eyes off Julia. The way she smiled softly, leaned in to whisper something in her companion's ear, her hand resting lightly on his, but whenever the man looked away, Julia would quietly glance toward Ethan again, her eyes flickering between nostalgia and forbidden longing. Ethan lost track of how many drinks he had, only knowing that time passed in waves of unfamiliar emotion. When Julia and her boyfriend stood to leave, Ethan thought everything would end there. A chance encounter, a silent glance, no words exchanged. But at that exact moment, Julia suddenly stepped away from the man, quickly making her way toward the restroom. As if acting on its own, Ethan's hand put down his glass and he stood up, following after her. The narrow hallway to the women's restroom was shrouded in dim light, the glass walls fogged with condensation. Julia stood with her back against the wall, her eyes shining with a fragile yet determined fire. Neither spoke in that moment. Every sound seemed to melt away, leaving only the ragged breathing of two former lovers. Ethan stepped closer, not sure what he was searching for, a greeting, a hug, or just confirmation that the feelings had never truly faded. "Are you all right?" His voice was husky, so quiet that even he was surprised by it. Julia gave him a sad, trembling smile and shook her head. "Do you really think I'm all right?" That simple answer was like a spark to the ashes of 3 long years. Ethan reached out, brushing his fingertips gently over Julia's cheek, feeling her soft skin, the lingering chill of rainwater. She didn't pull away, nor did she say anything more. There was only that gaze, so earnest, so vulnerable, half wanting to flee, half pleading for something to break free. No one could say who made the first move. Suddenly, Ethan pulled her into his arms, feeling her body trembling against him. Their first kiss barely brushed Julia's lips, raw instinct, no calculation, no asking for permission. She responded, passionately, desperately, as if they had both waited forever for this single moment. His fingers wove through her hair, drawing her closer, their breath mingling, hot and familiar, a scent he never thought he'd find again. Heels tapped quietly on the tile, Julia's fingers dug into Ethan's shoulders, their lips refusing to part even for a heartbeat. Outside, the rain pounded harder, drowning out their ragged breaths, the sound of fabric sliding against skin, and every last hesitation lingering in the minds of two adults who knew they shouldn't do what came next. Ethan's hand traced slowly down her bare back beneath the thin dress, every movement defying the rules they had once set for themselves. Julia pressed closer, arms locked tight around his neck, her body heating with each second, melting into him. Their kiss deepened, wild, urgent, as if the smallest sound in the hallway could shatter everything. But in that moment, they forgot it all. The boyfriend waiting outside, morality, the past, all the consequences they could not begin to imagine. Only when Julia's phone chimed from inside her purse did she finally push Ethan away, her breath ragged and her eyes full of words she dared not speak. "I have to go back," she whispered, her trembling hand smoothing her disheveled hair and smudged red lips. Ethan looked at her in the smeared light of the corridor, every apology seemed meaningless. "I know," he murmured, voice hoarse. But as Julia turned to leave, their eyes met one more time, heavy, intense, full of unfinished promises. That night, Ethan didn't go home right away. He stayed at the bar, finishing his whiskey, eyes fixed on the raindrops lingering on the glass. In his mind, Julia's image, her breath, lips, desperate gaze, and ragged moans spun in endless circles. A rainy night, seemingly just an old memory replaying itself. But deep down, Ethan knew something had begun again, even though they both knew. This was a kind of love that should never exist. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the bedroom window, slipping past the thick curtains and illuminating a blurred lipstick stain on the pale gray bedsheet. Julia awoke amid the faint, lingering scent of perfume on her pillow, but the space beside her was emptier than ever. She brushed her fingers over that faint mark from her own lips, a heavy wave of guilt welling up in her chest. On the nightstand, her phone kept flashing with messages. "Where are you?" "I'm waiting at the front desk." "Julia, everything okay?" All from Marcus, the man she still called her boyfriend, the man who was about to become her husband. Julia turned away, burying her face into the pillow, desperately trying to push away the chaos inside. Last night felt like a dream, or maybe an unforgivable mistake. The last time she'd felt Ethan's hand on her back, his urgent breath, and that burning look in his eyes was when they were still in love, before everything shattered for reasons neither dared to speak aloud. Every detail still flickered in her mind, every shiver deep within her body, the longing that had slept for 3 years, all of it needed only a fleeting moment to ignite into a wildfire. But reality was always cruel. Julia sat up, resting her head against the cold headboard, letting her tangled hair spill over bare shoulders. After a long while, she finally stood, pulling back the curtains to let sunlight erase some of the shadows from the room. On the mirror, the smudge of lipstick lingered, a wordless reminder of a night she could never erase, yet lacked the courage to confess to Marcus. She touched her face, closed her eyes, And in that fleeting moment, Julia heard her heart pounding, a mess of fear of being found out and an insatiable hunger she had never fully satisfied. Across the city, Ethan woke in his tiny, perfectly tidy apartment, a place so orderly it bored him. From his bedroom window, he watched the early morning traffic flow beneath the sunlight. The memories of Julia from the night before replayed in his mind more vividly than ever. Her soft lips, the familiar scent of her skin, the feeling of heat radiating beneath his touch. He pressed a hand to his chest, trying to steady his breath, but his heart wouldn't listen. It hammered wildly whenever he thought back to those moments. He didn't text Julia. Truthfully, he couldn't bring himself to do it. They both knew what they felt was wrong, forbidden, but it was also too real, too visceral to bury for another 3 years. Ethan stepped into the bathroom and let cold water run over his face, hoping it would wash away the remnants of her from his skin. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw Julia, her gaze meeting his during their kiss, the way she trembled beneath his hands, the helpless rush of her breathing. That hunger had lain dormant for 3 years, but now it was alive again, stronger than any sense of reason. Marcus wasn't a bad man. He was successful, elegant, everything Julia once thought she wanted. Stability, safety, a clear future. But only Ethan could shake her to her core, wild, reckless, impossible to resist. Julia got dressed, put on her makeup as usual, but her red lips trembled at the thought of facing Marcus that evening. And, more than that, at facing herself in the mirror. By late afternoon, as every alleyway in the city was bathed in sunset gold, Ethan received a strange text message. "I need to see you. Don't ask why." No name, but just a single line, and he knew instantly. It was Julia. They met at the Riverside Park, their old haunt from the days when they were still in love. Julia sat on a stone bench, hands gripping the straps of her purse, eyes cast down to where the fiery sky was reflected in the water. When Ethan arrived, she looked up, her eyes red but filled with a steely resolve. No greetings, no explanations. "Last night, I can't forget it," Julia whispered, her voice shaking with emotion. "But I can't keep lying to Marcus. I don't know what to do." Ethan sat down beside her, his hand instinctively reaching for hers, feeling her trembling fingers intertwine with his. They sat in silence, only the wind and their racing heartbeats filling the space between them. Ethan took a deep breath, searching for words, then let it go, letting his emotions override any attempt at logic. "Are we just a mistake, or is this something that never really ended?" he asked, his gaze searching for the truth in Julia's eyes. She didn't answer. Instead, she quietly placed his hand over her chest, where her heart was thundering. Her eyes burned with desire and helplessness, as if she, too, couldn't tell right from wrong. And in that instant, every boundary dissolved. Julia threw herself into Ethan's arms, kissing him fiercely in the empty park. This kiss was no longer hesitant or fearful, only a burning desire unleashed after years of repression. They pulled each other into the shadows of the trees, where darkness concealed every trace of guilt. Ethan pressed Julia against the rough trunk, his lips exploring every contour of her body as if branding every inch of her skin with memory. Julia moaned softly, her hands trembling as Ethan unzipped her dress, revealing pale skin still scented with last night's perfume. The sound of rustling leaves beneath their feet blended with their urgent breaths, with the choked sobs of someone who was at once terrified and desperate for freedom. All their inhibitions and rules melted away in the moment. They gave themselves to each other again, this time even more intense than that rainy night before. Ethan held Julia tight, his lips wandering from her neck, down her shoulders, sliding slowly to the delicate skin at the nape of her neck that made her shudder. His hands didn't stop at the familiar places, but sought out those forbidden spots. Places only they could understand, where every touch, every breath meant something more. Julia clung to Ethan's shoulders, her cries muffled in his neck, their legs entangled in the clandestine throes of ecstasy. She didn't know if she was crying or simply releasing all the feelings locked up inside her for 3 years. Their lips refused to part, bodies melded together, every movement carving a new, nameless scar into both their memories. When it was over, Julia rested her head on Ethan's shoulder, tears streaming silently down her face. Ethan stroked her hair, trying to hold on to the sense of belonging that was already dissolving into the night air. They didn't say a word, just sat together, savoring the brief peace before returning to the world of obligations and consequences. When Julia finally left, Ethan simply watched her figure disappear among the trees. A new fear welled up inside him. What if someone had seen? What if Marcus found out? What if Julia never came back? But just then, Ethan's phone vibrated, an unknown number, a message with just 4 words. "I know everything." Ethan froze. Every emotion that had been building crashed down in a wave of cold dread. The second night of forbidden love had opened a new chapter, one of torment, fear, and scars that would never truly heal. The atmosphere in Julia's apartment thickened with an unnamed fog. In the days following their secret encounter beneath the trees, every routine felt shrouded in tension and unease. Julia did her best to keep up her normal life, brewing coffee for Marcus each morning, offering gentle smiles to colleagues, going to yoga classes in the afternoons as if nothing had happened. But even the smallest gesture, a hand Marcus placed on her waist in the morning, the way his eyes slid over a faint red mark on her collarbone, made Julia feel like all her secrets were on the verge of spilling from her lips. Marcus remained as gentle as always, but somewhere in his gaze there appeared a new chill, something impossible to read. That evening, just as Julia returned to the dinner table after washing her hands, she caught him quietly staring at his phone, its screen lit with an old message Ethan had sent her 3 years ago, a goodbye, one that ended without a period. Julia froze, her heart pounding so hard her palms grew damp with sweat. Marcus looked up, the corners of his mouth curving into a thin, sharp smile. "Is there anything you want to tell me, Julia?" The air itself seemed to turn to stone. Julia pressed her lips together, searching her mind for a reason, an excuse, a denial, but every word dried up in her throat. Marcus stood, moved closer, his eyes darkening in a way that frightened her. "You think I don't know anything? That a man just happens to be around you is just coincidence. Every night you come home late, every deleted message, every time you turn away when I touch you, do you think I don't notice?" Julia trembled, instinctively shrinking back toward the wall. But Marcus only reached out, pulling her close, the smile on his lips turning to a cold, hard line. "Do you still love him?" That question cut through all her efforts to forget, slicing through every illusion of peace she had tried to build. Julia wanted to deny it, to scream that it was all over, that she had chosen Marcus, that she wanted a family, a stable life. But just recalling Ethan's eyes in the park, the feel of his lips on her neck, Julia knew she could not lie to herself. She bit her lip and gave the faintest nod, her eyes brimming with tears. Marcus released her, stepping back. "Then you have to choose, it's either me or him. With that, Marcus picked up his coat, opened the door, and walked out, leaving Julia collapsing onto the floor, every breath squeezed from her chest. That night, Julia couldn't sleep. She lay alone in bed, memories of Ethan and Marcus swirling together like a storm. She remembered Ethan's small gestures, the way he always placed a hand on her nape when he held her, the way he whispered, "You're mine, always." Yet Marcus, even after knowing everything, had still given her a choice. That strange mercy left Julia racked with even more guilt, more pain than jealousy ever could. The next morning, Ethan suddenly received a text from an unknown number. "She belongs to me. Don't show up again if you don't want things to get worse." The brief message dripped with threat, a boundary Ethan couldn't ignore. He sat frozen, the phone heavy in his hand like a bomb. He scrolled through old photos, old messages, even drafts he had never sent Julia. For 3 years, he had tried to forget, tried to date others, but only after seeing Julia again did all his buried desire and wild passion come roaring back, stronger and more uncontrollable than ever. That night, Ethan went to the old bar, the place where everything had begun. He sat in a shadowy corner, the golden light accentuating the sharpness in his face, thinned by too many sleepless nights. Soon, Julia arrived, her eyes exhausted, lips red but chapped with worry. She sat next to Ethan, hesitating as if she was about to confess a crime that could never be forgiven. "Marcus found out yesterday," Julia sighed, her fingers twisting together in her lap. "He gave me a choice, Ethan. What do you think I should do?" Ethan looked at her for a long time, his hand resting on her knee in a gesture of comfort, but his eyes brimming with desperate longing. "What do you want, Julia? Do you want safety, stability, or do you want to live true to your own heart?" Julia broke down crying. She leaned into Ethan, her shoulders shaking with all she'd been holding back. He gently pulled her close, kissed her forehead, then murmured words into her hair, words of love, of apology, or maybe just the sounds of someone willing to lose everything for a single chance to live honestly. That night, they rented a small room high in an old hotel, where the city lights filtered through thin white curtains and washed their bodies in a ghostly glow. There was no rush this time, no frantic urgency, only the merging of despair and a need that had been compressed to the point of pain. Ethan caressed Julia as though every inch of her skin was a new country to discover. She shivered in his arms, tears mixing with ragged breaths, the sound of flesh against flesh echoing in a silence so deep it was almost suffocating. Ethan's hands traveled down her back, gently slipping the dress from her shoulders to reveal soft, trembling breasts rising and falling in the dim light. Julia wrapped herself around Ethan, as if trying to erase the last distance between them. She moaned, whispering his name in a delirious haze. Ethan held her tight, his mouth wandering from her neck to her chest, down to her belly, each kiss marking her as if he could keep a piece of her soul from falling into the abyss. Their bodies fused, twisting together in movements both secretive and desperate. Neither spoke of tomorrow, of Marcus, or of the consequences that would surely descend at any moment. There was only the harshness of their breath, their shattered cries in the darkness, the salt of tears lingering on their lips. The climax came like a storm, sweeping away all guilt and fear. Julia cried out in pleasure, Ethan clinging to her, until both of them collapsed, naked and spent, as if emerging from a tempest. As they lay together, their breathing slowly calming, Julia's phone buzzed again, a message from Marcus. "I hope you won't make all three of us regret this." Julia's eyes darkened. Ethan pulled her close, and for the first time, he felt the real possibility that he could lose Julia forever. Beyond the window, the rain began to fall again, soft and unending, like a curse still waiting to be broken. The wedding was drawing near. Those early summer afternoons, full of blazing sunlight, seemed to mock all the secrets buried beneath the surface of happiness. Julia slipped on the ivory silk dress Marcus had chosen, standing before her bedroom mirror, looking at her own body. Sometimes she felt like a stranger, no longer the Julia of 3 years ago, no longer the girl who once dared to throw everything away for love with Ethan, nor the one who ever dreamed of a life of freedom. Marcus was busy with work and endless social commitments. He often came home late, but every time he did, he greeted her with a warm smile, a ready dinner, red wine, and gentle questions. On the outside, everyone thought they were the perfect couple. The successful man, the beautiful, gentle woman with a promising future ahead. But inside their little apartment, Julia felt increasingly suffocated, as if all the oxygen had been sucked away. Marcus's kindness was slowly turning into a kind of silent power. Every idle question, every scrutinizing glance, felt like icy claws digging into her bones. There were nights when Julia lay awake for hours, lost in a haze of anxiety. The sound of Marcus's footsteps in the hallway late at night made her flinch. Every time the bedside lamp flicked on, she felt exposed, stripped bare, with nowhere to hide. That night, Marcus returned home later than usual, his face icy. He entered the bedroom in silence, quietly removed his jacket, and stood by the window, staring out over the city. Julia sat on the bed clutching her blanket, too afraid to say a word. Suddenly, Marcus turned around, his eyes as dark and bottomless as a lake at midnight. "Is there anything you want to tell me, Julia?" His voice was soft, almost weightless, but each word fell like a pebble into the turmoil of Julia's heart. She shook her head, trying to sound calm. "No, nothing. I'm just a little tired." Marcus said nothing more, but Julia knew he knew everything. The way he watched her every movement, checked her phone, randomly asked about missed calls or deleted messages, these were all signs. Julia felt like a small animal in a luxurious glass cage, watched with every breath, every furrowed brow. The next morning, sunlight fell squarely on a faint bruise on Julia's shoulder, the remnant of last night's stolen passion with Ethan. Julia quickly pulled her collar higher, applying a thick layer of concealer, but nothing could erase the guilt inside her. Her phone vibrated. It was Ethan. "I miss you. I just want to see you for a moment, even from afar." Julia typed a reply, then deleted it immediately, afraid Marcus would see. At the breakfast table, Marcus glanced up from his newspaper and said, "Remember to be at my mother's tonight. She wants to see you. Don't wander off anywhere." Julia nodded, feeling like a puppet about to be dragged onto a stage. That entire day, Julia drifted through work, her mind hovering on the edge of two abysses. In the office, her colleagues chattered about wedding dresses, flowers, wealthy, doting husbands-to-be. Julia smiled, nodded, but kept sneaking glances at her phone, hoping for a message from Ethan to remind herself she was still alive. Later, stuck in city traffic, Julia closed her eyes, picturing Ethan's arms around her, his burning kiss beneath those trees, his hurried breath, the taste of skin mingling with tears. But reality always returned, ruthless as ever. When she arrived back at Marcus's apartment, Julia forced herself into the role of the perfect fiancé. She applied her makeup carefully, picked the most elegant dress, tried to erase all traces of wild nights. Marcus looked her over from head to toe, nodded, neither praising nor criticizing. They got into the car, neither saying a word throughout the drive to his mother's house. The big house was full of golden light, laughter, and chatter. The dining table draped in white linen, wine glasses gleaming. Marcus's mother, Ruth, hugged Julia tightly, asking endlessly about the wedding, about having children, about the honeymoon. Julia smiled, answering with lines she'd rehearsed. Yet Marcus's gaze grew colder with each moment, his hand on her thigh beneath the table squeezing tighter than usual, a silent reminder of her place. Throughout the dinner, Julia felt she was playing a flawless role, the perfect daughter-in-law, the ideal woman, polite, quiet, obedient. Only when the wine finally took the edge off did she dare to slip into the bathroom, leaning against the wall, letting out a long, shaky breath. She pulled out her phone, typed a message to Ethan. "I can't stand this anymore. I need to see you. Tonight, Old Hotel, room 602. She hadn't even sent it when the bathroom door swung open. Marcus stood there, his eyes ice cold, lips pressed into a hard line. Julia quickly put her phone away, forcing a smile. "I just needed a moment alone." Marcus said nothing, simply stared her up and down, then turned and left. Julia could feel the storm gathering behind her, dark and wild, waiting to swallow her whole. Back at the apartment, Marcus showered longer than usual. Julia sat on the bed, heart pounding. She still hadn't sent the message to Ethan. When Marcus entered the bedroom, hair still damp, he said nothing, just sat beside Julia, his gaze distant. Suddenly, Marcus pulled her into his arms, his lips trailing along her neck, hands unbuttoning her blouse, every movement slow, controlled. Julia felt a chill run down her spine, but she let him continue. His lips moved down to her chest, her stomach. Each gentle bite made her shiver, not from pleasure, but from fear of being discovered. Marcus hiked up Julia's dress, his hand sliding along her thigh, but instead of the usual urgency, he paused for a long time, eyes locked on Julia's face, as if searching for every secret in her mind. "Are you hiding something from me?" he whispered, his mouth at her ear, breath hot against her skin. Julia trembled, struggling to stay calm, biting her lip in silence. Marcus pushed her down, his body heavy on hers. He moved slowly, torturously, every touch a threat. Julia closed her eyes, trying to banish Ethan's face from her mind, but failing. Every time Marcus held her, she remembered Ethan's arms, his whispered promises, his hands discovering forbidden places. Beneath Marcus, Julia felt herself splintering, part obedient woman, part betrayer, and another part still yearning for freedom, for love, for release. Marcus sensed the change in Julia but didn't stop. When it was over, Julia lay still, silent tears streaming down her face. Marcus pulled up the blanket, stroked her hair, and whispered, "I love you. Don't do anything we'll both regret." Julia was silent, staring at the ceiling. Inside, a storm was raging without a name. In the middle of the night, when Marcus slept soundly, Julia quietly left the bed, threw on a light coat, and slipped out of the house. She drove through empty streets to the old hotel where so many memories with Ethan lingered. There, in room 602, under the soft golden light, Ethan had been waiting for her. He opened the door, pulled her into his arms. Julia burst into tears, pressing herself against his chest, as if the world outside had vanished. No explanations, no accusations. Ethan only held her, stroking her back, kissing away the tears that still lingered on her cheeks. They made love as if it was their last time. All the struggle, guilt, longing, fear, and hunger merged into an unstoppable wave. Julia's body blazed under Ethan's hands, every sense awakening, every place he touched exploding with feeling. She moaned with long-restrained pleasure, her mouth searching for his, their bodies tangled in a forbidden storm, intense, desperate, wild. Afterwards, Julia curled up in Ethan's arms. He stroked her hair, whispering, "Don't go back there, Julia. Run away with me. I don't care about anything as long as I have you." Julia closed her eyes, tears streaming down. She wanted to nod, to leave everything behind, but Marcus's face, her family, all the obligations of society rushed in. She shook her head, sighed, "I can't. He won't let you go or me." Ethan held her tighter. "I can protect you. I swear, Julia, don't be afraid." But Julia knew Marcus's power was not just in threats. His control, his connections, the secrets he held about her past, all these were weapons that could destroy everything in a heartbeat. They stayed together until dawn. Julia woke, watching Ethan sleep, his hand still clinging to her waist as if afraid she would disappear. She got dressed, gently kissed his lips, and left before the sun was fully up. Outside, fog filled the streets as Julia drove home, feeling emptier and colder than she'd ever been. When she reached the apartment, Marcus was already awake, the kitchen lights on, the aroma of coffee as normal as ever. He sat reading the newspaper, looked up at Julia, and gave a gentle smile, but in his eyes was a bottomless darkness. "Where did you go last night, Julia?" She forced a smile, answered softly, "I just drove around to clear my head." Marcus nodded, said nothing, simply stood, wrapped his arms tightly around her waist from behind, and whispered, "I love you. Don't disappoint me." Julia stood still, her heart pounding so hard it might burst. In her mind echoed a terrifying thought. Had Marcus known everything? What would he do if he found out? And more important, could Julia ever escape this spiral of control, or was she doomed to be trapped between two men, between guilt and the desperate longing for freedom? She bit her lip, turned to look at Marcus, and for the first time realized his eyes no longer held the light of a lover, but the oppressive shadow of a man who would never let his prey go. Julia sat motionless in the bathroom for a long time, the mirror fogged with steam reflecting her gaunt face and red, sleepless eyes. On the cold stone counter, the pregnancy test displayed two faint pink lines, undeniable proof that she belonged to Ethan, if only for a single night, but a night so deep it was etched in her very blood. She gently touched her belly, a vague feeling of both fear and anticipation swirling inside her. Something was growing in her now, not just a tiny new life, but a piece of freedom, a fragile hint of hope after so many days spent under control. Her phone vibrated again. The anonymous message was curt and chilling. "Old hotel, 9 a.m., alone." Julia knew this was a trap, but it was also the last chance for her to decide her own fate. She thought of Marcus, of the tightening control, of the cold, lonely evenings with a man she no longer loved. All of it became a pressure pushing Julia towards a crossroads from which there would be no return. She got dressed, chose a simple dress, threw on a long coat, tied her hair neatly, and applied her makeup as if it were just another workday. Marcus was still sitting at the breakfast table, stirring his coffee slowly, his eyes occasionally glancing at Julia over the rim of his cup. "Where are you going?" Julia kept her voice steady. "I have some things at work. I'll be home early." Marcus nodded, asking nothing more. But as Julia passed by, he suddenly grabbed her wrist and held it tight. "You know I love you very much, don't you?" His voice was low and colder than ever. Julia nodded, trying to hide her trembling hand. Don't make me do something we'll both regret. He released her, his eyes darkening as he turned back to his paper as if nothing had happened. Julia left the apartment, her chest heavy with each breath. Outside, a fine rain fell, the air thick with the scent of wet asphalt and the blare of car horns. Julia hailed a taxi, sat in silence, watching the city drift past the window. Inside, her heart was a whirlwind of fear, guilt, rebellious longing, and a small seed of hope beginning to take root. The old hotel still smelled of sandalwood, the yellow glow of the lights cast softly on walls whose paint was beginning to peel. Julia walked slowly along the red carpet, her heart pounding. At the end of the hallway, Ethan was waiting. He wore a dark sweater instead of his usual suit, his hair messy, his face thinner from sleepless nights. The moment he saw Julia, Ethan stepped forward, pulled her into the room, and shut the door with a slam. Before she could say a word, his lips were on hers, fierce and desperate. Julia burst into tears in his arms, every wall and pretense crumbling. "I can't take it anymore, Ethan." Ethan held her close, whispering into her ear. "Run away with me, Julia. I'll protect you and our child." Julia froze, staring at him, her lips trembling with unspoken words. You know." Ethan placed his hand gently on her belly, a small, wry smile on his lips. "I figured it out. You don't have to say it. I know everything that's happening with you." Julia broke down, burying her face in Ethan's chest. He kissed her forehead, then pressed his lips to hers again, this time gently, slowly, as if trying to erase every pain and fear from the woman he loved. Julia's body trembled in Ethan's embrace. Their lovemaking was no longer hurried or furtive. It was the union of two people willing to risk everything, to give up every tie, just for a chance to live authentically, even for a moment. Ethan caressed Julia as if she were something sacred, his hand sliding reverently over her belly, each kiss a silent promise. Julia moaned softly, her body shivering with each wave, tears and sweat blending together, long-restrained desire finally released, like fire surging through every fingertip. Ethan held her tight, his mouth wandering from shoulder to throat to breast to belly, stopping for a long moment where Julia's hand rested. "I'll be the best father," Ethan whispered, his eyes shining red with happiness mixed with fear. Julia sobbed, clinging to him, their bodies entwined, lost in the gray rain falling beyond the window. After their passion subsided, they lay quietly together, their breaths mixing in the stillness, with only the gentle sound of rain as backdrop to their hushed confessions. Julia never wanted to leave Ethan's arms, but soon the clock neared noon. "What do we do, Ethan? If Marcus finds out, I'm afraid he'll destroy not just you, but me and the baby too." Ethan stared at her for a long moment, his hand gently stroking her hair. "Are you ready to risk everything? I could lose my job, my house, even my freedom, but I don't care as long as I have you." Julia fell silent, a tidal wave of inner struggle rising in her chest. Deep down, she knew she could no longer turn back. Once Marcus knew the truth, not just she, but all of them would be caught in the whirlpool of his revenge. They decided to stay apart for a few days to plan their escape from the city. Ethan asked a trusted friend to book plane tickets and rent a small apartment in the suburbs. Everything needed to be discreet, beyond Marcus's watchful eye. Julia returned to Marcus's apartment, anxiety clinging to her, eyes darting at every shadow, as if the darkness itself might expose her secret. Marcus remained calm, greeting her with a cold kiss on the cheek. "I have to go out early tonight, have dinner alone." Julia nodded, grateful that Marcus was leaving, buying her precious time to prepare. She packed her clothes, documents, a little cash, some jewelry, and sentimental keepsakes. A childhood photo with her mother, a handkerchief from her, an old journal. As night fell and darkness settled over the city, Julia sat by the window, listening to the rain tapping outside, her heart pounding with anticipation and fear. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Julia jumped to her feet, her heart racing. She looked through the peephole. It was Marcus. He hadn't called or texted. He just appeared, impeccably dressed, holding a bouquet of white roses. "Did you forget our 3rd anniversary?" Marcus gave a gentle smile, but his eyes were as dark as the night outside the window. Julia forced a smile, accepted the flowers, trying to hide the fear crawling beneath her skin. Marcus sat down, placed his phone on the table, never taking his eyes off her. "You've been going out late, talking less, always tired. Is there anything you want to talk about, Julia?" She shook her head, avoiding his gaze. Marcus reached out, pulled her close, his hand stroking her back, each touch searching for the slightest reaction. Unexpectedly, Marcus leaned in and whispered in her ear, "I don't like being deceived. If I find out someone has betrayed me, they'll pay the price." Julia shuddered, clutching the edge of her skirt. Marcus gave a faint smile, let her go, and returned to reading his paper as if nothing had happened. But to Julia, all the light in the world seemed to go out. That night, Julia couldn't sleep. She sat silently in her room, listening to the ticking clock, as dread grew heavier in her chest with each passing hour. She knew that if she didn't act soon, Marcus would destroy everything. Not just her love for Ethan, but also the future of her unborn child. As dawn approached, Julia composed a message to Ethan. "We have to go now. I can't wait any longer. If you're ready, meet me at the train station at 7 a.m. I love you." She hit send, hands trembling. Then, quietly, she packed all her things into a small suitcase, hiding documents and cash in her coat pocket. By the time Marcus woke, Julia had breakfast ready, smiling as usual, but there was a determination in her eyes that had never been there before. Marcus walked her to the door, holding her in a long embrace, whispering into her ear, "Don't make me regret this, Julia. I know everything, but I'm still waiting for your choice." Julia turned away, tears threatening to fall, her heart beating fit to burst. She left the apartment, melted into the rush of the city's streets, her mind focused on a single goal: escape. Under the awning of the train station, in the press of the morning crowd, Ethan was waiting. He pulled Julia into his arms, kissed her for a long moment, his hand gripping her waist as if he feared she might vanish at any second. "Let's go, Julia. Let's start over. I won't let anyone hurt you or our child." Julia nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. They boarded the train, leaving the city behind just as the sun rose, abandoning everything: the past, the fear, and even Marcus, whom Julia knew would not give up easily. On the small train carriage, Julia rested her head on Ethan's shoulder, her hand on her belly, feeling for the first time a fragile ray of hope growing inside her. But somewhere, a shadow still lingered. Would Marcus let them go? Would this forbidden love ever truly find freedom? Or was it only the start of another spiral, where truths had never yet come to light? The train glided through the misty dawn, the sound of steel wheels grinding on the tracks like the anxious heartbeat of fugitives. Julia sat by the window, eyes watching the scenery slip away behind them, her hand tightly entwined with Ethan's. The warmth of his touch seeped into her fingers, her final anchor after all those days spent on the edge. Inside the silent train carriage, every sound of the outside world was shut out. Here, it was just the two of them, and a tiny, unborn life, proof of the forbidden love they had paid so dearly to claim. As the train left the city, Julia felt a part of her past left behind as well. Ethan squeezed her shoulder, quietly asking, "Are you all right?" Julia only nodded, offering a faint smile. For the first time in months, she felt light, as if tons of stone had been lifted from her chest. But deep within, there was still a thin layer of ice cracking. The fear that Marcus could appear at any moment, that all of this was just a fragile dream about to shatter. Their new apartment in the suburbs lay on a quiet street, green leaves shading them from prying eyes. Ethan rented it under his friend's name, every document meticulously prepared. On their first day, Julia was stunned by the peace. The little kitchen fragrant with coffee, white curtains swaying in the breeze, gentle sunlight flooding the living room. Ethan embraced her from behind, chin resting on her shoulder. "This is our new home, Julia. No one will ever hurt you again." Those first days passed like a beautiful dream. Julia gradually grew used to her newfound freedom. No more watchful eyes, no more questions disguised as gentle concern. She and Ethan shared every little task. He woke early to brew coffee, she cleaned, they went shopping together, cooked, and talked late into the night beneath the soft golden glow. Each night, Ethan would hold her for a long time, whispering sweet words into her ear, his hand never leaving her belly for a moment. They made love with abandon, no longer afraid. Each time they joined, they felt truly alive, unburdened by the darkness of lies and control. But life is never simple for those who have defied fate's rules. One morning, Julia received a message from an unknown number. "You think you've escaped. No matter where you run, the past will find you." Signed, Marcus. Julia's hand turned cold. She showed Ethan, whose eyes darkened but no longer held the old fear. "I expected this. I'll protect you and our baby." From then on, they lived in a state of alert, locking every window, checking cameras, never going out unless absolutely necessary. Julia lived in a constant state of tension, every sound in the hallway making her jump. Ethan tried to be her pillar, but deep down, he knew that just one small mistake, and Marcus would find them destroy everything. Time passed, and Julia's belly grew. Ethan cared for her in every way, even ready to give up his job just to stay by her side. There were nights Julia dreamt of Marcus standing at the door, his face icy, his eyes dark as a void, his hand gripping something sharp and glinting. She would wake in a sweat, Ethan pulling her into his arms, whispering, "It's just a nightmare, love, just a nightmare." Then, one day, Julia was washing dishes when there was a loud knock at the door. Ethan was out and she was alone in the silent apartment. Julia, trembling, approached the door, heart pounding. Through the peephole, she saw a man in a delivery uniform. "Package for Ms. Julia." Julia opened the door and accepted the parcel. No sender was listed. Inside, she found a bouquet of dried white roses and a letter. "Congratulations on becoming a mother. Don't think it ends so easily. I always know where you are." No signature, but Julia understood. Her hands shook, tears spilling down her cheeks. When Ethan came home and saw the flowers, the letter, he knew they couldn't run forever. He held Julia, kissed her hair, and whispered, "We have to leave, find somewhere else, or face Marcus. I can't let you live in fear anymore." Julia broke down, clutching Ethan. "I'm scared, but I don't want to run anymore. If Marcus wants to destroy everything, then let him see. I'm not afraid of him any longer." That night, for the first time, Julia took the lead with Ethan, fierce and burning. She pulled him to the bed, her hands exploring his body as if to memorize every line. Ethan was surprised but swept up in Julia's passion. Every movement, every moan, every bite on his shoulder was an affirmation. "I choose you and only you." They became one, wrapped around each other as if there was nothing beyond this, nothing but desire, freedom, hope. The next morning, Julia woke to Ethan already up, making breakfast, smiling kindly as always. But in his eyes there was something strange, a mixture of peace and concern. They ate breakfast, laughing like young lovers. Julia looked at Ethan, rested her hand on her belly, and for the first time truly felt ready to face anything. With her coffee half finished, the doorbell rang. Ethan told Julia to sit tight and went to open it. The door swung open, a loud noise sounded from the hallway. Julia only had time to hear Ethan's shout and saw a figure burst into the apartment. It all happened too fast. She saw Marcus's eyes, cold and filled with hatred, before everything went dark. When Julia awoke, the apartment was bathed in hazy light, her head throbbing. She lay on the sofa. Beside her, Ethan was bound, blood at his mouth, while Marcus stood tall in the middle of the room, both relaxed and menacing. "You really thought you could run from me, Julia?" Marcus sneered, his eyes never leaving hers. Julia struggled upright, pain flaring in her belly. She cradled her stomach, trying to protect the unborn child. "Marcus, please don't hurt us. Please." Marcus shook his head, advancing, a small knife gleaming in his hand. "You're mine. You'll never belong to anyone else. As for that child..." He bent low, his eyes wild. "If it's mine, it will live. If not, I won't allow it to exist." Ethan fought, trying to shout, but Marcus only laughed, more chilling than ever. In that split second, Julia grabbed a glass from the table and smashed it against Marcus's head. Glass shattered, Marcus reeled, and Ethan broke free from his binds, grabbing Julia and pulling her into the hallway. But Marcus, regaining his balance, chased after them, knife flashing. The chase raced down the stairwell, their shouts and footsteps echoing through the building. Just as Marcus grabbed Julia's sleeve, a neighbor, alerted by the commotion, opened their door. Marcus hesitated, and in that moment, Ethan landed the final blow, knocking Marcus out. Sirens wailed from the street. Someone had called the police. Marcus was arrested, his eyes blazing with hatred as he screamed at Julia. "You'll never be free, Julia. You're mine forever." The police led Marcus away. Julia collapsed in Ethan's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. But in the dawning light, she knew she was truly free. No shadow was large enough to swallow the freedom and love that she and Ethan had risked everything to win. A month later, Julia and Ethan moved to another city. Life was far from easy. The old scars, painful memories, and Marcus's ghost still lingered somewhere, but they were ready to face it all. Julia gave birth to a healthy baby girl, with Ethan's warm brown eyes and gentle smile. Every night, watching her daughter sleep in her father's arms, Julia knew. Forbidden love was nothing to be ashamed of. It was the force that brought her out of darkness, back toward the light. But some nights, as Julia rocked her daughter to sleep, a shadow flickered at the window. Sometimes a single white rose appeared silently on the sill. Sometimes it was just a chill along her spine. Julia knew the past never truly lets go, but this time she was not afraid. Because behind that door were Ethan, their daughter, a family she was ready to defend at all costs. No matter if the past returned or darkness crept ever closer, Julia would never bow to fate again.